So I was with a number of you on Wednesday evening at Cypress Adventist School for a Christmas program. You know, when we think about Christmas, it's kind of natural to think about kids. And when you have kids in school, the annual Christmas program is one of the highlights. I must say I was impressed. You know, kids are always impressive. But one of the things that maybe it's been too long since I went to one of these programs, I don't know. There were these kids saying these long passages in groups from memory. I'm going, what? You know, I used to be able to remember stuff. Have any of you over 50 tried to learn a memory verse recently? You know, it doesn't stick very long, does it? So we're delighted when we see our school shaping our kids, because the shaping that happens when you're young cannot be done equally easily later. Perhaps some shaping can be done then that can't be done later. The church puts a lot of effort into education, appropriately. And I like the way that connects with our scripture reading today. Because if you read, who showed up in Bethlehem when Jesus really needed it, the way Matthew tells the story, the only people who showed up were, you fill in the blank. Was it the kings of Orient? Was it the wise men? Was it the Magi? Whatever. And if you go and you read commentaries, you can find all kinds of interesting speculative stuff about who these people were. The reality is we don't have any idea. I like Ellen White's description of them. She says they were wealthy philosopher scholars. Oh man, I like that. That's kind of cool. I always dreamed of being a wealthy philosopher scholar. Do I have one of them yet? I don't know. Okay. Here's my point. At that point in the Matthew's telling of the Christmas story, the range of people who could do what needed to be done was very small. From Luke we know about shepherds and innkeepers. Imagine shepherds or innkeepers showing up in Jerusalem saying, "The Messiah has been born." You would smile. If it was your neighbor, you would just smile and keep your mouth shut, and then go home and tell your wife, "He's lost it." They would have, in fact, made zero impression. The way Matthew tells the story, if shepherds and innkeepers had tried to do what the wise men did, the birth of the Messiah would not have been announced. As it was, the way Matthew tells the story, because of who they were, the wise men's arrival in Jerusalem and their questions set the whole place abuzz. Now, as you know, this publicity was not entirely helpful for Jesus or his parents. But it's important in Matthew's telling of the story. He gives us the genealogy, which we've looked at, and he includes the whole world in his genealogy. Patriarch Abraham and King David, and prostitute Rahab and Moabite Ruth. And then my favorite is Eliab. Now, you guys all know about Eliab, right? Show me, let me see it in your face. You know his story so well. Of course you don't. He's the perfect nobody. His sole claim to existence is that his name was written in that list. We are all in the story, as Matthew tells the genealogy. But when Jesus is born, nobody knows that that genealogy is owned by Jesus. As Christian readers, we know that Joseph has had a dream, and an angel has said, this child is a divine child. But that's us, believers who are reading the story. That's not the name of Mary and Joseph in Bethlehem, and it's certainly not the leaders of society in Jerusalem. But after the wise men have been there, they know something's up. Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? We have seen his star in the east. If anybody else had said it besides those guys, you would know it and nobody else would have paid any attention. Jesus needed some help, and it was help that required a very special group of people to deliver it. People who'd spent a lifetime studying. That was just the beginning. People who had earned enough money and who had risk-taking genes in their body to spend that money traipsing across the desert on camels. It's a great story. And it connects with what we do in education. I smiled, forgive me for this. Let's see, what Ronson Royal, David City, there was this line that children are supposed to be mild, obedient, good as he. Maybe my mother wrote that, I don't know. A faint, distant wish. And actually a disservice to most of the guys in the room. Would you really want this to be a description of your 6-year-old kid? Mild. I was talking with a daycare person at their Christmas program on Wednesday night before Cypress's school. And they said that the year before, the class, their group had been almost entirely guys. And there were 2 or 3 guys, lapping the basement. Said last year, they were all, the parents are in the middle talking. And then you just had, We do not educate our children, at least I don't, hoping that they will grow up to be mild, compliant objects of sweet music. I hope that at least some of them will have the edge that would make them get on a camel and go 1,000 miles chasing a dream and show up and stir the whole city because they're announcing that change is on the horizon and maybe not very far away. My first Sabbath here, I met somebody it was a brief encounter. It was like 60 seconds. I'm meeting, gazillion people. But I remember this person, and many of you know her. Hi, I'm Jennifer. I'm from Kenya. I'm doing HIV research and I'm going to South Africa. And in my head, I'm tracking the map. Kenya, UW, South. Man, HIV. Maybe I was primed to pay attention because my son has been hounding me to read the book by Paul Farmer, Pathologies of Power. I finished the introduction. I regret to say that's as far as I've gotten. My personal introduction to AIDS came in a phone call. New York City, mid-'80s. I read about it in the paper. I knew about it, but it was still, there. Phone call from Ron. He'd been to the doctor, needed to talk to me, and at that point, his conversation just it went loops. It went everywhere. He needed to tell me something, and he couldn't bring himself to putting the words on it. I knew parts of his story he didn't know I knew, and so I asked him, I said, well, was it Kaposi's? Yeah. Did they give you a diagnosis of AIDS? Yeah. In the mid-'80s, diagnosis of AIDS was a death sentence. It was more than that. It was the trap door through which you fell into the great abyss. You were untouchable. When I visited Ron in the hospital, I was required to gown and glove and mask. I'm guessing in those days we still didn't know for sure transmission routes. I don't remember all those details. But I remember the precautions. And then when you went from the hospital to the world where Ron's parents lived, it was not merely that you were untouchable, you were experiencing the curse of God. The word AIDS was never mentioned by his parents, not even after he died, because it would not have just destroyed his son, their son. It would have destroyed them in their social environment. In that world, the church could help Jesus out by providing some touch, some compassion. The church could do what can be done with a good heart. But Jesus was not satisfied with that. Jesus touched lepers. Magnificent gesture, which included these outcasts. But Jesus didn't just touch them, he healed them. We can touch with no more equipment than a good heart. But the healing that this particular disease and many represent requires more than that. Which takes us back to education. Jesus needed help in the mid-'80s. He still needs help. And when it comes to AIDS, he wants the help of a good heart. That goes without saying. But he needs the help of people willing to spend years and years and years and years chasing PhDs. And then to spend decades hiding in laboratories and clinics, bit by tiny bit, accumulating the knowledge that underlies our current medical practice and hopefully will take us way beyond where we are. Jesus needs help that only a select group of people can give, people who have been uniquely qualified to give that particular help. And when it comes to addressing AIDS, it's not the whole world that can address that. Which takes us back to Jennifer. I don't know your story, Jennifer, but I've heard you allude, and a few other people allude, to the long and difficult journey following the star, following God's call in your life. If you're going to fix something like AIDS, even for the most comfortable of us, that's a difficult, arduous journey. For some, it's way more arduous than others. But here at Christmas time, we celebrate the birth of the baby, the helpless one, the one who showed us that the littlest people are prized by God. And we celebrate the kings, the Magi, the wise men, the people who are willing to invest a lifetime in cultivating their mind and building income and building social standing so that they can take those things and employ them in the service of God and humanity. Here in this congregation especially, the story of the Magi challenges us. We are gifted. Naomi, I love it. Eyeglasses. I don't know. I now have these fancy glasses. Oh, I know they're not fancy. My daughter tells me they're hopelessly out of date. But anyway, I paid good money for these. Before that, I was, using the $3 pairs that I bought at the hardware store, and I had dozens of them, all over the house. They were cheap. And the team that Naomi was representing is going to take my cheap throwaways to places in this world where my throwaways will transform, make a significant difference in somebody's life. We are indeed blessed. We are the kings. Jesus calls us to follow the star, to make sure that our rich gifts advance the cause of the kingdom of heaven. Merry Christmas.